Hello. The poem we're considering today is The Destruction of Sennacherib by Lord Byron. Before we start, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so by hitting the button below. I have the poem here, so let's start. The Assyrian came down like the wolf on the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold, and the sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea, when the blue wave rolls nightly on deep Galilee. Like the leaves of the forest when summer is green, that host with their banners at sunset were seen. Like the leaves of the forest when autumn hath blown, that host on the morrow lay withered and strown. For the angel of death spread his wings on the blast, and breathed in the face of the foe as he passed. And the eyes of the sleepers waxed deadly and chill, and their hearts but once heaved and for ever grew still. And there lay the steed with his nostril all wide, but through it there rolled not the breath of his pride. And the foam of his gasping lay white on the turf, and cold as the spray of the rock-beating surf. And there lay the rider, distorted and pale, with the dew on his brows and the rust on his mail. And the tents were all silent, the banners alone, the lances unlifted, the trumpet unblown. And the widows of Ashur are loud in their wail, and the idols are broke in the temple of Baal. And the might of the Gentile, unsmote by the sword, hath melted like snow in the glance of the Lord. This poem is based on a story from the Old Testament of the Bible, and by using several writing techniques, Byron makes the story exciting and dramatic. Stanza 1 sets the scene. Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, brings his great army to the gates of Jerusalem. Byron uses simile to compare the Assyrians to a predatory and sneaky wolf. By using the metaphor fold, the people of Jerusalem are compared to vulnerable and perhaps scared sheep. Byron then emphasises the power and size of this Assyrian army. He emphasises this in the colour of their uniforms. The bold colour purple suggests power and gold suggests wealth, while cohort suggests the great numbers of soldiers the Assyrian king has to command. Gleaming also suggests they are proud and arrogant. They are showing off their power and confident of their victory. They are so confident that they need not disguise their presence. They allow the people of Jerusalem to see their gleaming armour and the sheen of their spears from far in the distance, because they believe this will be an easy victory. The technique of sibilance, that means the repetition of the S sound, sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea, makes a hissing sound like the Assyrians are deadly snakes. It also references to the serpent in the Garden of Eden in the Bible, who represents the devil. And the sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea. Here, the poet is using hyperbole to suggest the soldiers are as numerous as the stars. They are so confident that they set up camp right outside the city walls, in view of the people of Jerusalem. They are so confident that they believe that morning will bring them an easy victory. And presumably from the city walls, the army banners can be seen. Byron mentions that their green colours are seemingly as numerous as leaves in summer. In stanza 2, Byron continues to build up the drama, again using hyperbole. He compares the army to the numerous leaves in a forest, like the leaves of the forest when summer is green. Also, the comparison may apply to the numerous war banners the Assyrians have brought with them, that host with their banners at sunset were seen. Here host has two meanings. The first meaning means a great gathering, a great number of people. The second meaning can be a host of locusts. As you know, these are destructive insects that destroy everything in their path. As we read up to this point in the poem, we really do fear for the lives of the people of Jerusalem. We feel it's just not going to end well for them. However, suddenly there's a turning point in this poem. The poem suddenly takes a surprising turn. Byron uses antithesis, opposites, to show the great change in fortune for the Assyrians. At sunset they were powerful, but in the morning we find, like the leaves of the forest when autumn hath blown, that host on the morrow lay withered and strown. The great army has been totally destroyed. It's been annihilated. They are scattered upon the ground, strown upon the ground. What could have caused this? Byron builds up the tension here. He doesn't tell us straight away what's caused it. He just gives us a description of the great annihilation of this army. So we must read on. In the first line of stanza 3, we are told that the angel of death has destroyed the Assyrians. While they slept, the angel swept through their camp, breathing death upon them. God has come to Jerusalem's rescue and sent the angel to kill the Assyrians in their sleep. And the eyes of the sleepers waxed deadly and chill, and their hearts but once heaved and forever grew still. Byron presents several graphic images of the dead soldiers. Waxed suggests the change in the Assyrians' fortune. Wax is a word associated with the changing cycle of the moon. It also has associations with the texture of dead flesh. Chill contrasts with the poet's earlier reference to the warm colours of purple, green and gold. In the following two stanzas, 4 and 5, the poet paints an eerie scene. He recounts how the angel of death has left nothing alive, not even the horses. The use of pride explains one reason for the Assyrians' destruction. Like the proverb, pride comes before a fall. The phrase rock-beating surf suggests that the dead horse's heart is now like stone. Instead of the rhythm of the horse's hoofs going into battle, we have only the sound of the waves against rocks. It's a great suggestive description. Instead of describing many of the soldiers the angel has killed, the poet cleverly and economically describes one. He describes a cavalryman, his body distorted in its final death throes, his face pale. We encounter him in the early morning. The morning dew is on his brow, his forehead, and the transformation of his armour is described. It has rusted. Then Byron describes the wider scene. The tents are silent. No one is alive to carry the banners or to lift the lances in readiness for battle. The war trumpet remains unblown. Stanza 5 contrasts starkly with stanza 1, in which Byron paints a scene of animation and readiness for war. By stanza 5, this once mighty army has been annihilated. It's an eerie scene. In stanza 6, Byron suddenly transports us to the Assyrian capital, Ashur. Notice how Byron moves to the present tense. He describes the events like they are happening now. This makes his description vivid and immediate. He describes the suffering widows of the soldiers. They are wailing loudly in their grief, loud in their wail. Perhaps we are meant to feel sympathy for them, or perhaps Byron includes them to stress the consequences of war and how it negatively affects both military and civilian alike. And this transition into the present tense makes the widows' wailing even more stark. And the widows of Ashur are loud in their wail. Byron may also include this detail to emphasise the depth of God's destruction over the Assyrians. God has destroyed all the gods of their temple. They lie broken. Baal or Baal reminds us that the Assyrians' plan to destroy Jerusalem was evil and wicked. Baal is the Assyrian word for Lord of the Flies. The word Beelzebub derives from this. Beelzebub is another name for a demon associated with the devil. It also reminds us that this is the carnage that the Assyrians intended to render on Jerusalem. God has turned the tables. He has given the Assyrians a taste of their own medicine, so to speak. In the final lines, Byron sums up the story neatly while affirming the power of God. The Gentile, this meaning the Assyrians, were killed not by the sword being a symbol of the power of man to cause destruction, but instead by a force far stronger. In the final line, Byron uses a simile. He says one glance by God was enough to destroy a powerful enemy. The simile, melted like snow, compares God's power to the sun's rays. Although we may feel some sympathy for the Assyrians, especially for their grieving widows, Byron reminds us that the soldiers were not killed by the sword, but while they were sleeping, which was more than they had planned for the people of Jerusalem. There was at least some mercy shown by God. Interestingly, the citizens of Jerusalem do not feature much apart from being compared to innocent and vulnerable sheep in the first line. Instead, the poem emphasises the power of God as their protector. Although the Assyrians are mighty, the power of God is even mightier. The poem's form is narrative, a poem that tells a dramatic story. Each stanza has a rhyming couplet and a repeated pattern, A, B, B. This simple rhythm drives the story forward and gives the poem energy. Also notice that nearly half the lines start with and, which links all the events and forces the story forward. To appreciate the effect of what Byron achieves by using these techniques, I strongly recommend that you read this poem aloud. Because the poem is based on a story from the Bible, Byron deliberately uses archaic, that means old-fashioned words like waxed and strown. He also arranges the order of words, their syntax, so they resemble the sentences in the Bible. For example, he writes, "their hearts but once heaved," rather than "their hearts heaved once." One theme is how war results in destruction, but also results in unintended and unseen consequences. The outcome of war is never certain. Even the Assyrians, who looked likely to destroy Jerusalem, were defeated by forces beyond their control. In context, Byron was extremely interested in the Middle East, in the Bible, and the Greek and Roman world. He was equally interested in politics. In 1815, when this poem was written, Europe had been at war for 16 years. The Emperor Napoleon had conquered much of the continent and seemed destined to rule over it for decades more. However, his mighty army, seemingly invulnerable, had finally been destroyed. Firstly, like God in the poem, by forces beyond their control, this being the fierce Russian winter in 1812, and then by warfare at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the year the poem was written. Perhaps Byron is comparing the arrogance, the pride, the overconfidence of Napoleon with Sennacherib. Although written over 200 years ago, the poem remains relevant. It warns us of the ambitions and arrogance of leaders who embroil their nations in war. As the 20th century has proven, these ambitions are short-lived, end in destruction, and bring disaster on all, especially the nation that started the war. This poem is totally different from the poem She Walks in Beauty that we analysed earlier. This proves the versatility of Byron as a writer. This poem is worth comparing with What Were They Like by Denis Levertov, which considers the destruction war brings to civilian populations. Some essay questions to think about. How does Lord Byron build excitement and tension in the poem The Destruction of Sennacherib? Compare how Lord Byron and one other writer uses poetry to comment on the effects of war. How is Lord Byron's poem The Destruction of Sennacherib still relevant in the 21st century? If you haven't watched our video of Byron's poem She Walks in Beauty, don't forget to check it out along with our other videos. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe so you can keep updated every time we publish a video. Please also remember to hit the like button and to ring the bell. Until next time, from Carol and me, write well. Rust